Ready.
So obviously these are your kidneys. This is also an individual kidney model. From there, urine is going to pass down the ureters over to the urinary bladder. Inside we have folding, which we can see here. That folding are now the urinary rugae. The muscle layer here is called the detrusor muscle, nice and strong. And then you have urinary mucosa on the inside, but it really doesn't look any different from the folding. I mean, it is the folding as well. So one would be the layer, and then the other I would describe as the folding, so that you know that I'm asking about the rugae in particular. From there, the urine exits out through the urethra. Obviously, this would go all the way to the outside. Here it is in females, in males, very long. Okay. From there, we move over to our kidney models. One thing that you want to be able to see is the difference between the cortex and the medulla. So the cortex is out. The medulla is always a different color. On this one, here's the cortex, and then the medulla are these guys. The capsule is the smooth part on the outside. So this is all capsule here, and that's capsule. Okay, they want you to be able to recognize a renal pyramid. All of these guys, these sort of triangle shapes, are the renal pyramids. Here's one blown up, really big. Okay, so this is one renal pyramid. The end of it is called a renal papilla. So you can see it here would be a renal papilla. Here's a renal papilla. When we look at the whole kidney, this indentation area is the hilus or the helium, either one. What we see in here, this area in here is called the renal pelvis. This is where all the urine is going to collect before it exits out the ureter. The renal pelvis is the place where the minor and the major calyces combine. So this is a minor calyx, and then once they come together, this would be the major calyx. Okay, so they're like funnels, funneling the urine down to the renal pelvis before it's going to leave. Then they want you to know all the different arteries, bringing it in. These are the renal arteries and the renal vein. Once it comes up and it passes between the renal pyramids, we call that the interlobal artery and the interlobal vein. As it arcs over the top of the pyramid, that's called the arcuate artery, and they don't have you learn, oh, and vein, okay, they do. So the arcuate artery and vein, then little branches of the arteries and veins come up into the cortex. Those are the interlobular arteries and veins. And I think that's it. So from there we move to the nephron model. Remember, I think hopefully you're reading that the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. This is the bad boy here. So this is what we need to learn. And so we're going to sort of alternate between this one and this one. All these green balls are trying to show you the renal corpuscle. The renal corpuscle is made up of a knot of capillaries called the glomerulus, but then a surrounding capsule where the urine's actually going to begin to form. This is either called the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule. So either word is fine for that. The actual knot of capillaries is the glomerulus. So we can see that is what we're seeing here, blown up really big. This is the renal corpuscle. The green part here would be the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule. The knot in the middle is the glomerulus. Okay? This is a blood system. All of this space in green is where urine is forming. What happens is that the blood enters through the afferent arteriole. Okay? It's going to enter into here. And the blood then comes down into the glomerulus. There, the pressure is high enough that a lot of the fluid exits into this surrounding cup. And then the blood is going to come back out through the efferent arteriole. So you need to know those three structures. From there, this fluid is going to travel through a system of tubes. We're going to add things to it and remove things from it, and eventually that's urine. So that's the basics of how the system works. Covering the glomerulus, you need to be able to recognize the podocytes. Podocytes are cells that sit on top of these particular capillaries that change their permeability. The renal are highly permeable, so they would be the cells sitting on top. In between them, all these little squiggly lines represents what are called the filtration slits. They're just big openings, so things exit in mass in your kidneys. They also want you to be able to recognize the difference between the parietal and the visceral layer of the glomerular capsule. This inner one is the visceral. Okay, so once the liquid is accumulated in here, it's beginning to become urine. It's going to exit out through the proximal convoluted tubule, or the PCT. This is the beginning of it. If we remind ourselves that this is that renal corpuscle here, all of these bad boys are, then this little convoluted portion of the tube here is proximal. It's the one closest to the renal corpuscle. So this is the PCT. I know I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but what's going to happen then is that it's going to travel down the urine, the loop of Henle. Okay, we have some that are quite long and we have some that are shorter. And I think in your text it has, you know, the difference between juxtamedullary and cortical, and so you're thinking difference in length of loop of Henle. Once it comes back up the ascending loop of Henle, it's going to move into the distal convoluted tubule, where it will eventually attach up to a collecting duct, or a collecting tube, good, we'll call it duct, that then takes it towards the papilla. So you can see they always look like tree trunks because each of these would connect up to many nephrons. So they're trying to remind you of that before they all dump many collecting ducts at the papilla. So that's this. All this in white is the urine forming system. We have the glomerulus that initially provides the liquid, but as I said, we're going to add things to it and we're going to take things away, which means we need a blood system next to the rest of the tubes so that we have something to take from and add to. So the one thing that we don't show really clearly is that surrounding these proximal and convoluted tubules, you have a system of capillaries. Those are the peritubular capillaries. So as things are traveling through these two systems here, you can imagine all blood vessels surrounding it. We don't have those, so those won't be on the practical. But what we do have is that as it travels down the loop of Henle, it travels by the vasa recta. And you'll learn all about why it's important that there's this vasa recta when you move into physiology. But it looks sort of like the bunting banners at 4th of July that sort of travel across like that, right over the loop of Henle. One thing to also note is that on this model, the last thing I want to just remind you of is this is PCT. This duct here is the DCT. So this is the distal collecting tubule. It comes back and over the front. It'll help you to remember that when you hit the slides, because we'll always be able to find it up. The afferent tubule is always bigger than the efferent. So even if you can't tell which is which, because sometimes they put different ones on top, the bigger one is always afferent, the littler one is efferent. That way there's really high pressure in the glomerulus. That's it.